Hey everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of MoCast. I know
time.
it's been 2 weeks.
About time, man.
Oh man, yeah, it's been some time. You know, people are busy. It's still summer. A lot of folks are on vacation and whatnot. Not everybody's playing the game.
I was about to say.
But nevertheless, what do we have for today?
Well, today we have the Windwalker podcast, which is something that we've been trying to get a hold of for quite a while, and we're really stoked about this because we're both Windwalker fans.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously today we have some really cool guests, but I'm not going to go into details myself. I'm gonna let the boys introduce themselves. So starting with Babylonius, which you probably should know if you've been at least
if you don't know about Babylonius
in the Peak Discord at least once. Go for it, my man. Tell the people who actually still don't know who you are, what you do, and stuff like that.
Sure. So, I go by Babylonius. I am the current owner, administrator of the Monk Discord, Peak of Serenity, as well as the owner, administrator of the Monk website, peakofserenity.com. I also write the Wowhead guides and the Icy Veins guides for Windwalkers. I've played Windwalker since about a month or two into Mists, minus a short break during Nyloth, a progression where I switched to Demon Hunter because I just felt like my brain needed a break and I didn't want to think for a couple weeks. But beyond that, I've been pretty much dedicated Windwalker and find me pretty regularly in Discord answering questions and stuff like that.
Pretty cool. And we're also going to have all the links to the boys in the description. We're going to have Twitches, YouTubes, websites, Discords, all of that. So be sure to check the description for these fine gentlemen, because they're definitely worth it. Now let's pass it along to Mr. J Funk.
Hey, I'm J Funk. I'm a purple name in the Peak Discord, and I stream a lot and like to talk about Windwalker a bunch.
That's it. That's about it, baby. It's one hell of an episode we wanted to do for quite a while, because I know Peak of Serenity also had its podcast. I know there's a lot of Mistweaver talks in there. At least I know Nowally is a regular Dale.
Yeah.
And we had a Nowally too on the Mistweaver, and we're like super happy to get the big boys from the Windwalker gang here. Yeah. And just to start it off, because Babs did mention that he started playing Monk deck basically from its inception. So this is a question for both you guys. Where do you think Windwalker had its best iteration in the game? It could be now, could be in a different expansion, and why? We can evolve from there.
Right. So that's obviously a question we get asked a lot. I think, for me personally, I need to kind of split it up or kind of caveat the answers. I think
for sure.
In terms of best design, I think Windwalker. I think Windwalker right now is nearly at its best design wise.
Yep.
However, I think Tomb of Sargeras with the tier set bonuses that we had back then was just kind of the pinnacle of the way that I feel Windwalker should play, which is very smooth. Not super spammy, but very fluid, kind of one thing into another.
Oh, yeah.
But I do think overall, even though Windwalker is strong right now, I think Antorus, in terms of Windwalker's overall strength, Windwalker was super strong in AoE and in single target back then. So I think in terms of strength, I'd have to say Antorus, but in terms of design and kind of the actual play style, Tomb of Sargeras is still up tops for me.
Cool.
All right.
And I guess we can agree the current version of Windwalker is pretty legit, as Babs mentioned, because I felt the same way while playing it and stuff. I didn't. We can go even deeper into that. What about you, G Funk? What do you think?
I would agree with probably Tomb of Sargeras, but I think each iteration of Monk throughout the expansions has had something that I enjoyed differently about him. I think Re-Uplaod had the Tiger Eye Brew model of cooldown, which I enjoyed more. But then I think Legion had a lot of cool AoE stuff that was fun to use, like the Mark of the Crane changes that it got in Legion helped it be more fun in AoE. But I think right now, if you play Kyrian, it can be pretty fun and emulate the Tomb of Sargeras playstyle a little bit, which is pretty cool. I think Tomb of Sargeras, I guess, overall.
And like, do you agree? Like, do you feel like currently in Shadowlands, as we speak, Windwalker, in terms of like design as a spec, do you think it's pretty solid? And I know it's performing well, and it's a really strong melee spec. But like, just in terms of like it's the mechanics, the design, and everything, do you feel it's right about I wouldn't say close to perfection, but pretty good. Let's call it like that.
Well, there's always room for improvement, I think, but I am generally happy with where it is. I think it has a pretty defined niche, which I think is good. But I think they could do better with some of the borrowed power stuff and like legendaries and balancing and things.
Okay. Well, about that, I was actually going to to mention this because Babylonia says something similar as well, that this might be close to as it can get to its best possible design. What do you guys feel like it needs to reach that point? And maybe elaborate a little bit on it if that's cool, and see exactly what.
Yeah, we can go into specifics. It's like if you guys know, like okay, there's this legendary that could be fixed in this way. Something you can just go wild with it.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just kind of lacking a lot of our abilities. Well, I should caveat because I definitely agree with J-Funk about Kyrian in terms of getting closer to that. That point of playing like Tomb of Sargeras. I think right now, a lot of people, are playing Necrolord, and I think Necrolord feels really good in AoE, but then it's just very plain in single target. I think Windwalker could really use just a little bit more of a single target identity. In that regard, I think we're known to be very strong in AoE, but ultimately, I'm somebody that raiding is my most important content that I do. So, being weaker in single target, generally means you're going to be weaker in boss damage, which hurts in raid. So, I think there's definitely some room. I would like to see other legendary choices. I'm not envious of the specs that have to maintain 3 or 4 different legendaries, at all times.
That's a pain, yes.
But at the same time, I really was not super thrilled with the fact that it's another tier of Invoker's delight. Even though I it's good and I like it decently, I would have liked to see a little bit more out of the Covenant legendary specifically. The Night Fae one is great and takes the top spot for that, but the others are really underwhelming.
So you feel like it's an issue of damage right now that could be improved, not necessarily mechanics or balance. Single target has been kind of an issue
decent
with Windwalker, at least from what we know.
Yeah, it's kind of a staple, I would say, more or less. There has been good times, there have been bad times, but it still feels that they just, I don't know, maybe that they still want to keep it in that, I don't know, AoE niche thing.
Maybe, but
I've seen Windwalkers do pretty good single target.
But I guess that can be easily fixed with legendary, right? Okay, baseline the spec has its pros and cons, and if you really want to like flip that, you can get this specific legendary in as well. And Invoker's Delight is fun. Personally, I kind of wanted to see some of the crazier ones that have some implications to like at least see something visual. But
big ass rising sunken.
I like more tigers, man. I like my tigers.
You want the tiger?
What
Okay.
But I was gonna ask as well. We can let J-Funk said as well. But if you guys can touch a little bit about on Venthyr afterwards.
Yeah, is there any Venthyr monks out there? A Windwalker? I would see.
They're just ones that are incidentally playing Windwalker because Venthyr strung for Mistweaver.
Right.
I'm sure there are people out there that are playing Venthyr because they liked it, and it's their preference. But in terms of actual performance, nobody's choosing Venthyr because they think it's gonna be the best in terms of damage.
There's no secret that people kind of went for the best. I think Preach did a video on this a while back. and I
Yeah.
don't think things have changed. He practically demonstrated like to Ian that people did not go necessarily for the fantasy choice. Oh my God, I like this Covenant. Everybody went for who's the fucking best. Okay, that's one. Let's go.
Yep.
So I guess that's the same thing. And I know in terms of Covenants, Baldur's Brew. I know a lot of monks pick that for PvP. If I'm not mistaken. In terms of like, because they do obviously in PvP, single target AoE, that's fine. But when talking about raiding, do you guys think maybe they could have addressed this through Covenant picking or Legendary picking? And I think I know what's the answer, but you guys can go ahead.
I think it's just that Windwalker has a lack of support when it comes to single target damage. You're noticing now that like the dreaded S sword, the scaling of Windwalker's single target is starting to rear its head. Like it's just really poor. But their AoE is just super good. So they just have a lot of support around that. Like they have Dance of Chi-Chi, which is absurdly good, and then they have Calculated Strikes, which is also absurdly good. But there's no equivalent to that on single target for them. In terms of fixing it, I don't really know. They just need to like add conduits or legendaries that are really good for single target, and like maybe change some talents that are better for single target. Because currently it's just like Dance of Chi-Chi is like way too good that you're the AoE spec and that's what you do. Especially on like the latest raid, like you don't do any single target as Bab said, but like on AoE fights you can just put a Windwalker on an AoE situation and then they can just handle it by themselves, which is really strong.
Well, you did mention the talents. I guess we can go through this. I don't know if you posted any updates, Babs, but at least on YouTube. Babs is very active on YouTube. By the way, you should definitely check out some of the in-depth info over there. Because of him, I understood how a couple of cooldowns work. But talking about talents, right? So we're gonna look at the last row. Do you guys think that maybe changing maybe Serenity or something like that could maybe help out with single target, or do you have like a different approach to it when it comes to talents? Because we know Chi-Chi is really good. What about the last row? Looking for it, or spiritual focus or anything like that?
I mean, personally for me, I think the single target, what Windwalker could use to benefit from single target is a lot simpler than that.
Right.
I think even though those things can get done, we can get a stronger single target talent, we can get a stronger single target legendary or covenant or stuff like that. But I do think it's really as simple as just a little bit of numbers tuning. Obviously there's a big concern when it comes to tuning these things that if you change Windwalkers, you have to balance things closely, or a changed single target will also change AoE where Windwalker's already very strong, and I think that's a completely reasonable concern. But at the same time, we have Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, but more importantly, Rising Sun Kick that are our primary single target abilities. And really, there's not, at least in my mind, a compelling reason why those couldn't just be buffed a little bit in order to give us a little bit more single target damage.
Do you guys think advocating for a couple of buffs for Windwalker wouldn't like outrage the people?
Yeah, just because that's just how it happens anyway.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of how Fury got the treatment back in Nathria, where they had a couple of weeks of buffing Furies little by little until it became a much better spec. And I remember they addressed Rising Sun Kick by once or twice, maybe you can correct me on that one, when the damage is. I still feel like whenever I play Monk, regardless of the spec, I don't know how much this issue extends to the other two specs as well, but Tiger Palm and Blackout Kick are so underwhelming. I just press that button and something happens with my resources. I cannot really tell if the damage is really there. So maybe that can be addressed for single target as well. I don't know how much that would influence this, because probably when it comes to damage profile of Windwalker, Rising Sun Kick is a much bigger piece of that.
I mean, the big concern with buffing Rising Sun Kick is PvP. Where Windwalker is relatively strong anyway.
Oh, yeah.
But they have that. They're supposed to have that technology to be able to tune those things differently, and they have shown that even in recent weeks. So I think that's something that I've been trying to advocate for a while, and Windwalker I think would still very much benefit from.
I think if they nerfed the buff single target, they nerf AoE a little bit though. Like nerf Dance of Chi-Ji a little bit. It's like way too. It's becoming a problem where it's like way too good now, especially with the conduit. It's just getting out of control. Where like when you get a proc, you just kill everything, and it's like I don't know how they would balance single target with that being as good as it is still.
I've seen the Dance of Chi-Ji procs in PvP too. Just circling back because there's a couple of clips out there which are ridiculous because people getting one-shotted by Dance of Chi-Ji, like by an AoE ability. This is like goes to the point that if they do change numbers and stuff, they will basically have a ripple effect to all the aspects of the game. And yeah, Windwalker is a pretty beastie mode right now in PvP. And as J Funk said, the whole AoE prowess of the spec is I would go and say a tad ridiculous, because I've seen some numbers and they're just all out wow. So maybe the compromise would be there to like, okay, maybe tune down a little bit either the talent or I don't know the numbers from Chi-Ji, and maybe buff as you said, I would say the builders,
well, I don't know exactly. Well, obviously they have a pretty good spreadsheet of information where they can choose exactly what's above. I just I'm slightly reminded of Havoc and BFA when we talk about AoE being so strong, where Havoc's AoE was so good that it was actually the single target rotation as well, where pretty much all of the builds had Blade Dance in them, and that was just a little bit weird. Where Havoc right now seems to be in a much better spot, where the builds, at least the 9.0 and 9.0.5 had different damage profiles, and that was pretty cool. So I don't know if they have to take that and apply it to Windwalker to an extent as well, because I still retain my opinion that Windwalker is maybe one of the best designed melee DPS in terms of rotation and mechanics. Even as a main of almost every other melee than Windwalker, I still cannot get over the fact that Windwalker is really well designed. I don't know how you guys feel after playing Windwalker for so many years, but I feel like mechanical wise, the only thing that they can probably do is tune some numbers, and obviously we can also go into the talents, which is we usually do with something like maybe finally make Whirling Dragon Punch baseline, since I've hardly remember a time where that was not used.
Yeah, that's like the staple all the time. You pick this all the time regardless, right? So this is why I was trying to like circle back to you earlier. It's like, is there any room you guys think that they could address like quote unquote some dead talents on the tree currently? Because I know there's a lot of talents that are actually pretty good and useful for Windwalker. I'm just always kind of looking at the last row, and always kind of seeing Whirling Dragon Punch like for a long time now. You guys think there's maybe some room over there?
Well, my opinion's unpopular, but I don't think that Whirling Dragon Punch should be baseline, because I think if they make it baseline, they'd have to like change it significantly as like nerf it and all that. But I think Whirling Dragon Punch should just move up a row, and they should just remove hit combo or something, because that talent is really boring. And then just make that bottom row more impactful and more interesting as a result. Most of their talents are most of Windwalker's talents are really low impact on purpose, I feel like, just because the base kit's so strong. They could make the talents more powerful, but it would come out as a result of like their base kit getting weaker, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely room for changes. I thought really when coming into Shadowlands and they added Dance of Chi-Ji as a talent, I thought that was a great change.
Yep.
I thought that they really could have kind of kept going with that idea in terms of using the Azurite traits that we had in the past, and I think and making that row. I think hit combo is just an awful talent. And rushing Jadewind in that row is also useless. So really, I thought they could have, very easily taken that row and used the Glory of the Dawn trait, which buffed Rising Sun Kick. Could have used the Fury of Zuen trait that gave us, additional Zuen and some other stuff as well. With haste buff and stuff, which is kind of what we have now with Invoker's Delight. And then as well as, then keeping Dance of Chi-Ji. And I thought that would give us kind of a choice between you could have a Glory of the Dawn to really focus on single target. You'd have Dance of Chi-Ji to focus on AoE, and I thought that would be a good change as well. I am on the side of making Whirling Dragon Punch baseline, and then I think that last row should all modify or augment Storm, Earth, and Fire in some way. With Serenity there, with Spiritual Focus there. I don't really like either of them particularly, but they are ones that that row just doesn't really have an identity. And I think it could be used, maybe one is the old Drinking Horn cover legendary from Legion where Storm, Earth, and Fire is made longer by casting things in it, or maybe it's stronger, or maybe it's just a single target, buff, or maybe like Serenity, it cuts down on resources spent. I think there are a lot of other options. I think they've just kind of used kind of the lazier options in many ways.
Definitely.
Well, I don't know how you feel about this, Babs, but they should revisit the thing they did in BFA and make Ring of Peace baseline for all monk specs, I think, again.
Yeah,
because that row is useless outside of Ring of Peace.
Yeah, we can definitely go into other rows as well. And I kind of agree with both of you when it comes to Whirling Dragon Punch. I think the biggest problem is the disconnect between what the row is supposed to do, because I feel like Whirling Dragon Punch is a really cool, at least visually pleasing ability, aside the glaring issue that it kind of forces you in place for a very long time for the animation. But it feels like it could be a last row talent where, you pick this and you just like fly into a whirlwind of punches and kicks. But if they kept it in the talent row, I feel like they would need to put two other talents similar to that. Maybe one for a single target, maybe one that's kind of a little bit of both, or I don't know. Because it definitely doesn't feel like Whirling Dragon Punch kind of does the same thing as Spiritual Focus and Serenity clearly. So that's just it feels like it just doesn't belong on that row. Maybe move it like Jake Fun said, maybe move it up, maybe instead of hit combo, because hit combo just feels like, you have a mastery. Look, this is what your mastery does. It's also a talent, so I don't know.
I mean, it is boring, that's the honest truth. And I don't think anyone played Rushing Jade. So, yeah, we have Dash Chi-Ji, which is super strong over there. Hit combo, which is super boring. Then Rushing Jade. So, and Babs did kind of hit the nail on it. It just feels lazy. They had the opportunity to go with it. As you said, Dance of Chi-Ji, great addition. I think like the perfect addition here would be, at least instead of Rushing Jade, something single target, then you would actually have a choice, right? Because now it's like basically Dance of Chi-Ji all the way, and I think hit combo maybe for pure single target. Hope I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well,
you basically take hit combo when you don't take Dance of Chi-Ji. Yeah. You don't really take hit combo on its own merit. You take it because Dance of Chi-Ji really is not going to do much for you on that fight. Like, so that's kind of it. Hit combo, and a lot of us have been saying this for a long time. It's not hit combo it gives you a punishment for mistakes. It's not a bonus for good play. Just you keep. It's like a 6% damage buff that you can lose, rather than one that you gain actively.
Yeah,
and more often than not, you're going to be playing Dance since it's like a pure single target fight like Guardian. Just because like any cleave that you can get Dance just immediately becomes better. So, well,
I guess in terms of the talents that they have, their work cut out for them. It's not to say the spec isn't good, because I know we got a couple of comments that you guys complaining that spec is so good. Now we're just talking, guys, discussing things that could be improved, right? Because everybody wants this game to get better, and you do play this game through your spec, your class. So that's the first thing you interact with. Might as well, go through all these things, and maybe someone over there at that Blizz maybe gets an ear and get some things rolling,
I mean, yeah, Bab said it pretty well. I think it feels like lazy where they just stopped at putting Dance of Chi-Ji, because they did add a lot more Azurite powers as to talents to other specs.
I know.
And they could have definitely added the Rising Sun kick Azure Power instead of hit combo maybe, or just add more, or not just Azure Power, because it feels like the more of these podcasts we do, the more we talk to people. It's like, man, we had this that was so good back then and they took it away. Why not just keep bringing stuff? I mean, I don't know how you guys see this would affect the overall design and maybe balance of Windwalker, but maybe they can bring out like other spells or other talents that Windwalker had in the past that worked really well and replace some of the dead talents. Like Jay Fine said, I don't know who doesn't take Ring of Peace, at least maybe outside of raids. And even now with raids having so many ads, Ring of Peace can be good. Mm-hmm. So that's just, it's so iconic and it's such a strong, it's very hard to emulate.
Abilities in the whole of the game.
It basically creates terrain, impassable terrain. That's a very hard utility to replace or compare against. So either make the whole row something similar to that or just put that baseline maybe.
Yeah, I think that, that row takes a similar, with good karma there, takes a similar stance to the last row and stuff like that. And that it just doesn't have a clear identity. I think you have Ring of Peace, which is obviously a control spell, and an iconic control spell for Windwalker. Then you have Tiger Tail Sweep, which is control, but really no one's going to take that even in PvP, because you can just take Ring of Peace. But then Good Karma really doesn't fit because it's defensive ability. So the idea that Ring of Peace should be baseline, I think makes perfect sense. I think the fact that Tiger Tail Sweep is pretty much never used means it could go. Honestly, I think Good Karma should be kind of the not baseline, but baseline for that row. And I think that row should be the row that modifies Karma. I still, even though it's a lesser issue now because Windwalker's more AoE focused, but the fact that Karma, still requires us to take damage, we still have that quote, degenerate gameplay that was talked about years ago. And I think if that row became karma focused, and all right, one of them, you have good karma that heals you when karma absorbs. Maybe you have bad karma that deals damage when karma absorbs, or other stuff like that. I think karma can become the identity of that row. But I think Windwalker has a lot, has quite a few of that, things that just don't, really fit with, having a clear identity for the rows. And I think that we would really benefit from, I don't think it's really a drastic change that has to happen. I think they're minor things. And I think, like you guys said, there's stuff historically that we could go back on. I have been advocating for Chi Orbit, which we had in Legion, to come and replace Eye of the Tiger. Just so it's 3 Chi-based spells. I think that would be just more thematic. I think Eye of the Tiger doesn't fit there in terms of its, the actual theme of it. But there's a lot of stuff, just minor changes that I think would just make Windwalker a little bit more flexible. So it's not just the same thing, week in and week out on every single boss.
Yeah, I guess that goes into the balance of the spec, which they've been having a hard time with it. And I was about to ask about the first row as well, because it feels, Eye of the Tiger seems like it's just there because of its name. I mean, I was never impressed about the particular effect. I don't know in terms of numbers how much is, because it has been some time since I've looked, and I don't think I've ever looked a lot at what the numbers for Eye of the Tiger are, but it just feels like that row is just the same for all 3 specs, and I hardly see any situation where I wouldn't want Chi Burst. I just like Chi Burst the most out of that row. So is there a particular reason why this row is still like this for Windwalker? Is there a competitiveness to that row, essentially? Since, I don't know. I think Chi Burst is just, maybe for my new brain, just feels like it's the obvious choice on that row pretty much always.
Well, I think you end up taking Eye of the Tiger or Chi Wave on single target. I think if you're a Necrolord, you'd do that. I think Chi Burst is still more valuable in your opener as Kyrian, but yeah, they're mostly just single target. But I think Eye of the Tiger was mostly picked on single target just because it's a passive and you can't really make any mistakes with it, like with Chi Wave. But that's the main point of the row, I think.
Yeah, right. I think they're all meant to be unimpactful. outside of an AoE situation where you can get just that extra chi from Chi Burst, You really could pick any of those three in a single target situation and be fine. And to a certain extent, I think that's a good design, because then it does let you play with I like this one better. I don't want to have to stop and channel Chi Burst for a second, so I'm not going to use that. Or, I don't want to have an extra button, so I'm going to use Eye of the Tiger, and still be okay. I think that's decent design. The problem is when, that's the design or that's the options, because the options are so underwhelming that you kind of just can choose whatever you want and not really mind it. I think it's just kind of the end result is different. I think the end result is correct, but the way you get there is incorrect.
I think there's a lot of room for design on that row. It seems like they want to generally make that row the same for all three specs. I know that Mistweaver has their like one new talent, different talent in there. It's like Miswrap talent, but besides that, they're all the same, I think, on purpose.
Yeah, I believe so.
I mean, it wouldn't be a new concept to classes where they share a similar role in between them, and I think it's kind of the same argument with the Ring of Peace, where Windwalker has good karma and the other specs have something else. And we talked a little bit about the talents, unless you guys have anything else that you want to talk about. I was going to ask about conduits, because when we did our research and we talked with you guys about, the best conduits and what to use for different types of situations, it felt like in comparison to other specs, Windwalkers had a lot more impactful conduits than the other ones. Now, in terms of how much it impacts your overall damage, that remains to be seen. But what do you guys feel, at least your overall impressions, I guess, about the conduit system right now and how it affects Windwalker? Would you like to see any changes, buffs, nerfs, maybe to swap? You did mention that there's the conduit that affects Dance of Chi-Ji, and that makes it a little bit too strong. Like, what do you guys think of the overall system? Obviously, we hope that I don't know if you guys wanted to have something similar in the next expansion, but what do you think of it? Any buffs, nerfs, or changes that you would like to see, maybe 9.2 or something like that?
I would like to see, a little bit more diversity, or a little bit more. I'd like to see a little bit more single target focus. Right now, Windwalker very much just kind of leans into the strength. Our strongest conduit, is kind of unequivocally the calculated strikes, which increases our spinning crane kick damage, which really is only going to be useful in AoE situations or situations where you're using Dance of Chi-Ji, which again should be AoE situations. But I think it right now, that is just scaling so out of control. I don't know how it's gonna go. Like, we knew this was gonna be a thing, and I just don't know how it's going to exist in future tiers. It just seems like it's more and more outrageous because of the way that it scales. The other ones I think are more or less fine. I'd like to see a little bit more out of some of them, but they all more or less are AoE focused, or ones that we would use in AoE. We don't really have one that we switch into just for maximizing single target damage. The one that's supposed to be that coordinated offensive is strong enough, which is fine, because you have to focus your targets on one target, but you do still use that in an AoE situation.
Yep.
So it's not really a single target conduit as much as a all-around conduit that aims to kind of force you into a single target situation.
I think you made a video about this or a post on the website, Babs, regarding coordinated offensive, because I think not a lot of people understood how it worked. And I even like the whole concept behind Windwalker Monk, right? Because we play Windwalker, we haven't really delved like super deep into it. Understanding exactly how Stormworth and Fire works, and how coordinate offensive the conduit works. It's I really do recommend for all you Windwalkers out there to definitely check Bab's YouTube, because there's a lot of knowledge there. You're gonna definitely get a better grip on understanding this spec. And speaking of that, I'm just gonna come off here and represent the people who are really curious about Windwalker Monks but are a bit scared because they've heard the rumors that it's not the easiest spec to pull off. What would you guys I don't know, give as a tip or as a couple of words of advice for people curious to try Windwalker book but are scared of its I would say intricacies, complexities. How would you address it?
So the way that I've handled that stuff for years, obviously Windwalker has rightfully in some senses and unrightfully in others developed a strong community perception that Windwalker is garbage.
No.
With the exception of with the exception of Antorus, where Windwalker is strong, and obviously it's much stronger now in Shadowlands.
Oh yeah.
So anybody who's played before Shadowlands, would remember that, how in Ny'alotha Windwalker was literally, it was awful. It was the worst of the worst.
It was.
Now Shadowlands is giving people a lot more of a reason to play it, and I think, the thing with Windwalker is it is more complex. It's not a spec that you just spam things over and over again, or you press the same button 1,000 times in a row. I think that's something that's very different, and a lot of people have to get used to. The idea of ABC always be casting is something that's prevalent in a lot of specs, and Windwalker is very much not that. If you're doing that, you're probably costing yourself damage. But at the same time, I think, the reason that we get a lot of compliments about the monk community and Discord and stuff like that is because those of us that have stuck it out, for a long time, people, you don't play Windwalker because it's strong. You play it because you love the spec.
Yes.
Because it's fun and it fits what you're looking for in the game. And I think that's the same now. It just also happens to be strong. We saw a lot of kind of the quote, flavor of the month people kind of flock in at the start of the expansion, and then 9.0.5 came out and they fixed some bugs. We lost a ton of damage and then got it back a week, 2 weeks later. But by then, the population damage had been done. So we're kind of working our way back. But I think Windwalker is gaining a little bit more of a positive reputation than it had in the past. And people are trying it and seeing maybe it's not as scary, or even if it is scary, the output right now can justify, some of that concern.
Even though it had this community perception, for, I would say, at least during BFA, more or less, in terms of the numbers we got from our Windwalker guides and stuff, and I know Babs always was kind enough to help us out with it, so thank you very much, Babs, for the record on those. Windwalker was always one of the most beloved specs, just out of pure numbers of us looking at all the specs that we did. So there's definitely love for the spec, there's definitely interest, but I feel a lot of folks are just scared of it because it's not. Even it took a while for me to adjust to okay, you cannot be pressing the same ability twice. That was one of the things, because you come from things like, I don't know, Fury Warrior or Half-Light, or even Red Paladin or something like that. There's this muscle memory that's stuck in, right? And for Monk, you always have to be aware and just be a little bit more methodical, right? Not spammy, always be casting. That's a general rule, for every DPS spec, I would say. But for Monks, it has to be okay. You need to stop a little bit, look at a couple of things and make sure you're not repeating yourself. So I think that's the most fascinating thing about it. What would you say to somebody that would want to get into it? What would be the first thing to don't be scared of this. It will eventually work out. Is there a beginner's trick that you would recommend to somebody or something like that?
Play
Necrolord. Yeah, Necrolord. Certainly is. We generally advise, especially newer people, to not jump into Kyrian. Kyrian's a little bit more complex with a much more room for mistakes, or I should say, but more punishing for mistakes. Necrolord, like J Funk said, is definitely on the simpler side, a little bit easier to understand. You kind of play the way the spec is, and then benefit from doing so. So I think that's a good point.
Is it how big is the difference percentage wise in terms of I wouldn't say mythic performance, let's say your average heroic plus 15s, that type of zone? Where would you guys like approximately put it? The difference between a Kyrian monk and a Necro monk.
Well, I think Necro is better in Mythic Plus right now than Kyrian, or at least they're like super close. I think Kyrian's better in single target, but it's much more complicated, and Necrolord is better in cleave situations, and it's much easier to play. I think Necro is just better to learn single target because you learn the baseline instead of all the fancy Kyrian stuff. But I do think that Necro builds bad habits for AoE, especially when you start spamming Crane Kick during the windows. But
I mean, I agree. I think they're close enough. That right now, obviously, a lot of people switch back to Necrolord, and we're seeing an explosion of Necrolord population. Largely because of people like Trill and stuff, and really just the design of the raid right now benefits Necrolord a little bit better than Kyrian. The windows are more frequent, whereas in Nathria, a lot of the DPS windows were every 2 minutes. Now they're every 1 minute, or some of them are every 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Which benefits Necrolord a little bit more than Kyrian. They're functionally, in a theoretical sense, if all else equal, they're pretty close to being identical in terms of performance. Necrolord's just a little bit easier to kind of get to that maximum, as well as just a little bit more flexible right now. But I definitely agree that, if there's a point that we are not playing Necrolord again, next patch or whatever, or even next expansion, when we're theoretically done with the Covenant system, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to have a hard time breaking that habit of spinning Crane Kick back to back.
Go ahead, Flames.
No, was about to ask because we among all the class guys that we do, we also do a tier list, and we try to make a disclaimer that meta is a factor that influences the community way too much than it should, and when they see top players play X or say Y about certain spec, they're like, oh my god, that's the Bible, that's the new thing, I'm not gonna play that, or I am gonna play that. And Marcelian kind of asked that in regards to Necro versus Kyrian, but I'm curious as to what you guys think about all the Covenants, because at least for certain classes, the Covenants are way more balanced now than
rogues,
they were
I can
in
tell you
9.
about rogues. Like rogues, differences, the Covenant choices between rogues are like super melee. You can actually go for like what you prefer.
Yeah, it's similar to a bunch of other classes, and I was curious because I always thought the concept of Fallen Order to be interesting. It's just that it seems like whenever they're designing a more mechanically interesting ability aside from just a buff, it's kind of harder to make it work. But I'm curious as to how they've made all of these numbers sink in into 9.1, and how far apart do you see each Covenant be from the top, and do you think that there's a point in game where that doesn't matter anymore, you can just go whatever Covenant? Because we felt like, at least from our level of play, heroic and plus 15s is pretty much, you can play whatever you want as long as you get the basics of the spec right. You can probably play whatever you want, and you're going to do way more damage than it's needed to clear that specific content. But we kind of like, if that's true, we kind of like people to hear it from, let's say, more reliable voices than our own, that just play what you want, and unless you're going for that 1% performance, then just choose whatever. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. The reason that, if you go into the Monk Discord and, I put together a flow chart for helping people choose, the reason that if you look at it, it says, are you a top Windwalker, like world class, then you should play Kyrian. Realistically, those people are playing Necrolord right now because those people aren't looking at a flow chart. Those people aren't looking at my guides, or, well, some of them are, but generally, they know the information that they're looking for. They know what they're trying to get out of a spec. So really the point that, and then it says, is DPS a factor at all? If somebody says no, they don't care as much about DPS, then the answer is they can play what they want. If it is a factor, right now the answer is they can play Kyrian, Necrolord, or Night Fae. Night Fae will fall behind in single target, but like you said, there's certainly something to be said for the amount of AoE in raid right now, as well as if you're playing on a not mythic and not pushing things super hard, and you want to play Night Fae, you can play Night Fae. The big thing that I tell people is that ultimately this is a game. It's meant to be fun. I did not like Kyrian. So the second that Kyrian was, it was okay, and I progression raid. So I, defaulted to choosing the one that was stronger. But, the second that I felt that I could switch away from Kyrian, I was out. I'd much prefer to be playing Night Fae right now. I think it fits my preferred play style better and just is the one that I enjoy most. But Necrolord is close enough that I'm not hating it. I'm not disliking it as much as I did Kyrian. But it's a game. You play what you want. If you hate one, then don't play it. You're supposed to be playing this game to have fun.
Do you hear that, Ian? You hear it? It's all good, man. It's all good. It's all love. Okay, so what about like looking a little bit to the future, right? And we're gonna circle back a little bit to possible solutions for single target on Windwalkers. Now there has been this discussion about tier sets coming. I don't know exactly what would that mean. If it would be the traditional tier sets that we all know from past expansions or whatever. But well, what do you guys think? Do you see tier sets for specifically for Windwalker something that could actually be used to fix the single target? Because I'm saying fix the single target, but I actually don't know how bad it is, to be honest. Is it that bad, or is it something that maybe just GG is too strong? But nevertheless, would tier sets be the answer, at least until the next expansion?
The tier sets could be. I think the value in tier sets over the years has been to provide variety, has been to, really allow a change. So you're not just playing the same spec, the same thing tier after tier.
Yeah.
I think, Covenants are doing that right now too, but I think that's because of the barriers and the requirements and stuff that it takes. I think that's incidental. It's not like, I don't believe that, that designers went into this tier and saying, okay, Windwalkers are going to want to play Necrolord now. This is going to be the Necrolord tier. Whereas previously for tier sets, they could do that. They could say, okay, this is the tier that Windwalkers are going to play this way. And next tier Windwalkers are going to play this way. So I think tier sets, they can be used to fix stuff like that. But I think the strength in tier sets comes in being able to provide that variety, that access to, maybe making another talent stronger or making a certain play style stronger that just changes how things go. And I think that's where the value of tier sets really comes in.
I know Ian, I don't know in which interview said that the tier sets are not going to be like your normal tier sets. I hope he was not referring to Shards of Domination. But it was something more in the lines of something like tier sets for Covenants or something like that. Covenant specific tier sets or shit like that. And that kind of got me worried.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that, and I think you guys can clarify this a little bit more. Covenants feel like it's just a very weird system to gate player power by. I can feel like Covenants were supposed to, or Conduits at the very least, which kind of work in tandem with Covenants. It's supposed to be like the new row of talents, the new abilities, the new Azurite that we would have gotten, which I never once ever use a system to compare it to. This is the new Azurite. We don't. It's not like anybody asked for that. But your opinion is basically shared by pretty much everybody, Babs. Tier sets are supposed to redefine the playstyle just a little bit, maybe change a little ability. This tier, you're playing your spec a little bit different. Obviously, they've been using external system power to fix issues and keep the core design of the spec a little bit minimal, so that they can just add layers of, okay, this tier monks need a little bit more single target. Let's just add Shards of Domination that would fix that. Obviously.
Wow, what a great idea!
So. Like you said, I don't think tier sets are supposed to fix things, but I rather add variety.
Just asking because that's their track record with the latest borrowed shit, right?
So
they band-aid stuff.
And I don't know how you guys feel if they do add tier sets that are Covenant tier sets.
I don't want them. I'm just saying
that's a horrible idea. I don't know what you guys think. And if they do that, what kind of bonuses would you guys think would be good for Windwalker?
Like thinking about the abilities, I'm guessing, right? Because it would be something enhancing or changing the Covenant abilities.
If they affect the Covenant ability again, I'm gonna.
Well, I mean, what else could happen with a tier set for the Covenant?
I don't know.
I mean,
Give you wings, make you lift. If you're Kyrian, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a situation where, at least for me, there's too many systems on top of the systems.
Well, thank you, Babs. Yes, that's good to hear from somebody else too.
I mean, I think that's, and I think these are all cool ideas. I can see how they made it through kind of the initial stage. But at least I think that right now, as even though I did say that earlier, I've been trying not to say that stuff, but I don't think it's laziness, like actual laziness, like, oh, I don't care, because I do think that the people who are making the game care, and that generally they want the game to be fun, they want people to enjoy it. I think there's a disconnect between those people who actually do the work to make the game and the people above them who tell them what to do. I think there's a disconnect there. And I think going into Shadowlands, I think we saw a lot of disconnect in between just the just the numbers. I think there just isn't enough of them, enough people in the positions to really be able to affect the change. I think if something like hit combo being left on the talent row, maybe if there had been more designers to do that and to focus on that, maybe it would have been done, or maybe more things would have been done. I think it's an asset, allocation type of a problem more than like an actual apathy or, lack of caring problem. But at the same time, it's, we don't necessarily have to care.
Yes, we're just chatting now. It's basically we're doing things like these. You have the Peak of Serenity website, Discord. G-Funk, plays it, and also helps out on the Discord. This is all out of the love of a fucking game.
What game? I'm thinking like one of the.
Does Final Fantasy have like class Discord,
I don't know
Discords with people making podcasts and websites,
specific classes or jobs, whatever they have that. I don't know about that. I know like other popular games, like let's say Diablo doesn't have that, like an Amazon website or a Barbarian website. I don't know if there's such a thing.
Diablo 2 fans, but
so I think like you said, Babs, I think some people get the wrong idea about WoW. I don't think the devs are lacking apathy or caringness because, well, unfortunately for some, their passion has been exploited for the game. So they clearly that the passion is still there. And just looking at how classes have been approached selectively leads me to believe that they're just allocating resources based on a priority system where fire mages and boomkins constantly get changes whenever there's something going on about them, or they're too strong or they're too weak.
Don't you love them?
Didn't fire mages get another thing this week again?
the Sunkings legendary
they had
thing.
a legendary change.
So I think it's definitely that, and I think like a lot of specs that people have a lot of love for, like Windwalker, like enhancement, like retribution,
survival.
I actually don't think survival guys that much love, man.
I know it does.
I think half of the people just want it to be ranged again.
Still, man, it's a love.
I think I don't know. I guess just our specs are selectively chosen to be addressed, and unfortunately, not everybody's getting the same amount of love. And I mean, we can only hope that that changes with the changes that are going on now. So who knows?
Hopefully things do turn for the better. Because I do agree with Babs. I've been saying it for a long while. I think it's actually a manpower problem at the company, or in Team 2 at least. I don't know what the fuck has happened over the years. Well, we kind of know a couple of things that happened, but we're not getting into that. Just to get into the closing chapters of the school discussion we had. So. Here's the $1 million question for both of y'all. Let's say, I don't know, Ian Hazikos, this comes up to you and
maybe
gives
not for long.
What? Shut up! and gives you a big sack of money to be in charge of the Windwalker spec. And he would just ask, okay, you have to invent an ability or look in the past and bring something back, a talent or something for Windwalkers. What would that be and why? And,
numbers aside.
Yeah, numbers aside. Don't care about balance. Don't think about balance and let Ian deal with that because he's
good
that
at that.
Yeah.
Changing Storm Earth and Fire into like Storm Earth and Fire from like MOBAs, like where each spirit has their own like ability and like stuff going on individually. That'd be pretty cool.
That would be interesting. And would you be able to actually actively control those abilities or those clones, or would it be still passive?
Well, in an ideal world, but I don't think WoW is a game that can handle that many controls and everything. So,
I think one of a cool idea off of that would be if our last tier of talents, you know, if the left one was Fire Spirit, if the middle one was, you know, Storm Spirit, and the right one was Earth, and then each one got, you know, that changed, that when you used the Storm, Earth, and Fire cooldown, you became that aspect rather than all three.
Cool. Yeah.
And that would change, you know, so maybe the Storm Spirit, you know, is AoE focused or single, you know, whatever. But I think that would be something that could thematically fit really, really well.
Oh, that would be so cool.
That would
Fire
free up
be
Whirling
the
Dragon
single
Punch to be
target,
moved
and
away
Earth
from
would
that.
be defensive wise, particularly for PvP
That
and
would
stuff.
be pretty
That'd be
cool.
so goddamn cool. Jesus Christ.
That feels like such an ambitious thing for them.
I would
to
play
do.
Windwalker just for that down road. That would happen.
Shit, man.
That would be so cool. Okay, so basically we got one answer from both of them. Anything else? You tell me something like from the past or something brand new, like actually brand new, like an ability, something that would rival Rising Sun King or anything like that. Because they have.
I mean,
Go ahead.
a big thing for me, you know, as much as I had historically not advocated for it, but I think Strike of the Windlord coming back, you know, from Legion would obviously, that'd be a huge fan favorite.
Oh yeah.
In terms of, you know, people have just been asking for it incessantly. You know, a lot of times it's because they want the damage that it had done, you know, not really realizing that you can't just add damage like that in a vacuum. You know, because that's just not how things work. There has to be a give and take to it. But at the same time, I think that there's room for that. And I would caveat that with the idea that doing that, back in Legion, we had an Azerite trait, or not an Azerite trait, an artifact power called Thunder Fist, where if you hit more targets with your Strike of the Windlord, then you would deal more single target damage. I think your auto attacks dealt more damage, or you attacked faster, whatever, after that. And I think that aspect of things, where more AoE increases your single target damage, would be a beneficial thing for Windwalker to have just as part of it. I'd like to see something like after you finish channeling Fist of Fury, you know, for every target that you hit during Fist of Fury, your next Rising Sun Kick deals X amount more damage. So that kind of one plays off of the other, and you can use, you know, I'd like to see more, you know, the reason that, going back to the start of our conversation, that, you know, that we talked about kind of my pinnacle of Windwalker design, the reason that my pinnacle has been Tomb of Sargeras is because there was a very close interplay between Rising Sun Kick and Fist of Fury. One buffed, you know, Rising Sun Kick buffed Fist of Fury buffed Rising Sun Kick. And they just felt like they worked together. And I'd like to see, you know, more interplay between Windwalker's abilities. Then I think it fits with the martial arts, with the, you know, the idea of that flow, you know, Bruce Lee, Kung Fu kind of, you know, theme. And I think something like that, I think leaning more into that, or the flip side, leaning more into the actual wind aspect, because Windwalker really has very few. We've lost a lot of our abilities that are, you know, literally wind based.
Yeah.
You know, and the ones that we do have aren't as used. You know, so I'd like to see one of those two directions, either really dive into the martial arts and let that be a thing, you know, be our focus, or really dive into, you know, the aspect of the wind. You know, I advocated back going into Legion for Windwalker becoming a ranged spec at the time.
What?
Yeah, so I wrote a really lengthy post back then. I was not only doing peak, but also moderating the MMO champion forums and stuff like that as well. So I wrote a big post about how I felt it was when they moved survival into melee, you know, and kind of saw that we already had a lot of melee specs, and adding more didn't really make any sense to me, and it still doesn't.
Fair enough.
But I advocated or kind of came up with the idea that Windwalker could be a ranged melee spec. So using the Storm, Earth, and Fire function to kind of shadow box our damage from at distance, and then our Storm, Earth, and Fire clones would copy it onto that target and kind of really utilize that function of the old Storm, Earth, and Fire, where you could choose for it to go on multiple targets rather than pressing it and them kind of doing their own thing. And I thought that would be a really cool way for Windwalker to still maintain its martial arts, still maintain its the flow and literally the abilities that we have, but deal damage from range rather than just being another melee into the group.
Well, there's at least 2 concepts of that already in the game, so I wouldn't see it being incredibly hard to implement. Enhancement has Ascendance, which turns your Storm Strike into Wind Strike. And you have Survival with Aspect of the Ego, which essentially turns your Raptor Strike into range. You do definitely both of those concepts kind of lose the auto attacks versions into the target because you're ranged, but I can definitely see how Windwalkers can like you punch a fist of air into your opponent or kick
winds, like abilities
or winds. That would be cool. And I think they're kind of opening up the ground. I don't know if intentionally or just as a coincidence byproduct, I guess, by having Survival kind of like a half range, half melee spec, especially in PvP, where you're, if you really think about it, as Survival in PvE, the only melee abilities are Raptor Strike and Carve, and pretty much Sting, Bombs, and all of that are ranged. So I wouldn't see why that kind of concept can be elaborated more. And maybe, who knows, in a world where you have a couple of melee specs that can actually shoot from afar, you wouldn't have this discrepancy between range and melee in terms of like high competitive raiding environment where you can just, kind of fill in more melees because they can also be half ranged at times, I suppose.
I think that like with Mistweaver being, at least historically supposed to being that, AoE, or sorry, not AoE, that melee healer, that now obviously we see a lot more often because they kind of gave it to Holy Paladins as well. I think they could have continued, or they could still continue with that idea of kind of subverting some of the kind of tropes about, various things, and Windwalker being, a spec that plays like a melee but does so from range, would be a good thing, just to help, give, like, we don't need more melee specs in the game. There's plenty. We could use more range specs in the game.
Well, I guess with that being said, one of the most, I would say, favorite specs, at least in our gang over here, and happy that we had the chance to talk about it and get a little bit through the talents and conduits and Legos and stuff. Is pretty cool. And now I'm actually thinking of maybe actually going Necro for the
leave your arms for it, man. I want to play alright.
All right. But the first thing, guys, thank you so much, Babs and J-Funk, for joining. And also, if you guys definitely want to check the boys out, the links are going to be in the description.
Check down below.
Highly recommend you check Babs' YouTube and Peak of Serenity Discord and the website if you really want to get into that Windwalker.
Highly recommend for anybody. We know we are there that you're asking us Windwalker questions, and it's not like we don't like to answer Windwalker questions, but if you haven't been to the Peak of Serenity community yet, both website and the Discord, you probably should, at least if you want to play Monk for any amount of time, especially Windwalker. It's one of the, personally, I feel, one of the best Discord community organized there, and you can easily find information that you want, especially on the website. It's pretty cool. So yeah, it's a lot of passionate people talking about the spec, and you'll definitely find like-minded people there.
Yeah, go there. Don't just say it after you watch this, of course. But that being said, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and we shall see you very soon, probably on the next Monday, if not the Monday after this. We're still figuring things out. Have a great week ahead.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.